Hi everyone, I'm the Spiritual Seeker. I am an independent researcher, numerologist, and member of Black Space Azania. A Black Space is a Black consciousness formation. You can follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page for more information and updates. In the previous series, we read Steve Biko's I Write What I Like, a collection of writings on the philosophy and movement of Black consciousness in the belly of Apartheid South Africa. We saw the importance that he gave to the psychological liberation of Black people as a collective, emphasizing that the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. In this series, we will be reading Chabani Manganyi's Being Black in the World. Manganyi was an academic, writer, and the first Black person in South Africa to be registered as a clinical psychologist. There are several questions that Steve Biko raised in the previous video series, centered on the use of fear as a political weapon by the apartheid regime to suppress liberatory efforts in the country. Biko asked, what makes the Black man fail to tick? Join us as we explore this and other questions in Manganyi's book, Being Black in the World. Hi everyone, I'm the Spiritual Seeker. I am an independent researcher, numerologist, and member of Black Space Azania. Black Space is a Black consciousness formation. You can follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page for more information and updates. As we did in the previous series, we will read and do summaries for each chapter in the book we're currently reading, Being Black in the World, and include book recommendations for further reading and for an expansive understanding of topics engaged in each chapter. Should there be no inconvenience in terms of connectivity and other things, we plan to upload the episodes every evening at 8 p.m. or every second evening at the same time. Please continue supporting this initiative by liking, reposting, and sharing the links. Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm the Spiritual Seeker. I am an independent researcher, numerologist, and member of Black Space Azania. Black Space is a Black consciousness formation. You can follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page for more information and updates. Prof. Chabani Manganyi was born on the 13th of March in 1940 and passed away on the 30th of October 2024 last year. He was a writer, academic, and the first Black person in South Africa to be registered as a clinical psychologist. He did his undergraduate and postgraduate studies at UNISA between 1960 and 1970, and later became Vice-Chancellor at the University of the North, now known as the University of Limpopo. After the 1994 elections, he was appointed as Director General of Education, and later, between 2003 and 2006, became Vice-Chancellor at the University of Pretoria. Among his published works is the book that we are currently reading, Being Black in the World, published in 1973, Looking Through the Keyhole, published in 1981, Political Violence and the Struggle in South Africa, published in 1990, and Apartheid and the Making of a Black Psychologist. He has also produced biographies for the likes of Eskiam Pahlele, Gerard Sikoto, and Dumile Feni. He was awarded honorary doctorates by Wits University, UNISA, and Nelson Mandela University, and an award for his book Apartheid and the Making of a Black Psychologist. In the next episode, we will start reading from the introduction to the book. Hi everyone, I am the Spiritual Seeker. I am an independent researcher, numerologist, and member of Black Space Azania. Black Space is a Black consciousness formation. You can follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page for more information and updates. In the previous episodes, we gave a general introduction to the video series, discussed the method, and went through a summary of Manganyi's intellectual formation and contributions to various fields. In this episode, we look into the introduction to the book we are currently reading, Being Black in the World, published in 1973. In the introduction, Manganyi gives an overview of what the book is about and situates his research within the field of Black studies. The central theme of the book is contained in the question he asks, whether there is a Black mode of being in the world. And if so, then how does it differ from a white mode of being in the world? This question also speaks to the observation that Steve Biko made previously, that the separate development of the settler colonial system of apartheid resulted into different living conditions for whites and for non-whites in South Africa. Whites as those who enjoyed the privileges of the racial system of apartheid, and non-whites or blacks as those who were bearing the brunt of oppression. Then, naturally, these two communities will have distinct experiences, or in Manganyi's parlance, modes of being in the world. It is also important to note that Manganyi was a senior to Biko and had a more academic outlook to the oppression of black people in South Africa, whereas Biko's outlook was more political. In the introduction, there is also mention of what he terms the individual schema and the sociological schema. The individual schema being the idealized image that one has of oneself, whereas the sociological schema is the image one has of oneself based on culture and experience. This is similar to the imaginary subject formation and the symbolic subject formation in Lacanian psychoanalysis. A reading basically of how the violence of anti-blackness undoes identity, as it is the case with the shattering of the corporal schema in Frantz Fanon, where the place of that shattering schema is taken by a racial epidermal schema. Since Manganyi situates his work within the field of black studies, at the beginning of the introduction, he also mentions a book of 3 volumes edited by J.N. Payden and E.W. Soldier, titled The African Experience, published in 1970, the one on the screen. Let us end off with a quote from Manganyi on the meaning of change in South Africa. At this stage in our history, it appears that it is necessary to put a spotlight on the meaning of change. It should be appreciated that the problem of the meaning of change and its implications is crucial for future race relations in South Africa. Hi everyone, I am the Spiritual Seeker. I am an independent researcher, numerologist, and member of Black Space Azania. Black Space is a black consciousness formation. You can follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page for more information and updates. In this episode, we look into the first chapter of the book we are currently reading, Chabani Manganyi's Being Black in the World, published in 1973. The name of the chapter is Who Are the Urban Africans? This is Manganyi's analysis of a growing number of Africans in urban or industrialized areas. In the past, these Africans were referred to as detribalized or transitional because most of their personal relationships were in the urban or industrialized areas. Unlike the rest, the migrants, whose personal relationships were mostly in the rural areas. Manganyi says the analysis of this group of Africans in urban or industrialized areas will come from black scholars themselves. This is similar to the essay called Some African Cultural Concepts, where Steve Biko writes about how the same white people who insist on writing about black people write from a detached point of view without any lived experience. A general observation one makes of this chapter is how Manganyi tends towards Frantz Fanon's analysis of how the Africans who travel to the metropole for work or for school tend to adopt the cultural norms that make them different from other Africans in the rural areas. That is the first chapter on language in Frantz Fanon's Black Skin, White Mask. At the same time, a lot of isiXhosa writers have already written about this, as in the cultural clashes between Amakawa and Amaqoboka. So, here in the first chapter, Manganyi makes a brief analysis of the lives of the westernized or urban Africans and how the cultural differences between Africans and white people have resulted into a communication gap in spaces of commerce and industry. Hi everyone, I am the Spiritual Seeker. I am an independent researcher, numerologist, and member of Black Space Azania. Black Space is a black consciousness formation. You can follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page for more information and updates. In this episode, we look into the second chapter in the book we are currently reading, Manganyi's Being Black in the World, published in 1973. The name of the chapter is Black Consciousness. In this chapter, Manganyi gives us a brief account of the political and intellectual developments that led to the formation of the Black consciousness movement in South Africa, particularly the formation of the South African Students' Organization, SASO, after the breakaway from the white-dominated NUSAS. As Biko observed, Manganyi does also recall that the decision to form SASO was met with shock, with white liberals accusing the black students of being racialist and militant. Manganyi does also note that the formation of SASO might have been the boogie of Swart Gevaar finally becoming a reality. When we were reading Biko's I Write What I Like, we did also go through the definition of black and how it was conceived as a more radical concept than non-white. In this chapter, Manganyi writes about how that shift from non-white to black was a move towards revitalization, towards an understanding of black consciousness as a philosophy and movement that goes beyond skin color, but recognizes the need for solidarity among black people. Here is a quote from Manganyi. In our definition of black consciousness, there is an implicit recognition of mutual knowledge. This recognition leads us further to that of black solidarity. From mutual knowledge to solidarity is a very short and logical step. Black consciousness should be understood to mean that there is mutuality of knowledge with respect to the totality of impressions, thoughts, and feelings of all black people. Close quote. In the introductory summary, we did mention that the schemas that Manganyi uses to think about black consciousness and the black mode of being in the world are the individual schema and the sociological schema. The individual schema being the idealized image that one has of one's body, and the sociological schema being the image that one has of one's body based on experience and culture. Manganyi does also highlight that the investment of the black consciousness philosophy was to change black people's sociological schema that has been carved and sustained by the settler colonial violence of the system of apartheid. In closing, a lot of people have been saying that Manganyi is up there with Frantz Fanon. This based merely on the fact that Manganyi was a clinical psychologist and was interested in the political developments of the anti-apartheid struggle. But this does not consider the fact that both the individual schema and the sociological schema that Manganyi used do not go beyond the body and do not consider the loss of bodily integrity, the shattering of the corporeal schema in Frantz Fanon's work. In that sense, when compared to Frantz Fanon's clinical and political work, Manganyi's analysis on blackness and on the black culture is incomplete and allows for further development. Hi everyone, I am the Spiritual Seeker. I am an independent researcher, numerologist, and member of Black Space Azania. Black Space is a black consciousness formation. You can follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page for more information and updates. In this episode, we look into the third chapter in the book we are currently reading, Prof. Chabani Manganyi's Being Black in the World, published in 1973. The name of the chapter is Us and Them. In this chapter, Manganyi discusses how the policy of separate development created two distinctively different realities for white people and for black people. This is something we have previously discussed while we were reading Steve Biko's collection of essays, speeches, and interviews. Whereas Biko refers to the separation as a mechanism that produced the oppressor camp and the oppressed camp, Frantz Fanon refers to the same as an anti-black colonial mechanism that produced a zone of being for the colonizer and the zone of non-being for the colonized. Moreover, in this chapter, Manganyi has particular interest in the existential questions concerning the sociological schemas through which we understand the white and the black body, resulting into distinctively different experiences for white people and for black people. Here is a quote from Manganyi. As long as the two sociological schemas of the body exist side by side, as is likely to happen for a long time in South Africa, it will remain true to say that the body will continue to foster and nourish the continuation of us and them categories. This means that there will continue to be being black in the world and being white in the world, two existential experiences. Close quote. As mentioned before, whereas the individual schema is an idealized image of one's body, the sociological schema is the image that one has of one's body based on culture and experience. In an ideologically totalist environment, the settler colonial violence of the system of apartheid produced a sociological schema of the black body as bad and inferior, resulting from an inversion where the sociological schema as point of reference predominates the individual schema, causing the black people to experience their bodies as objects, as things outside of themselves. If you would like to read along, please check the links in the comments section. Hi everyone, I am the Spiritual Seeker. I am an independent researcher, numerologist, and member of Black Space Azania. Black Space is a black consciousness formation. You can follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page for more information and updates. In this episode, we look into the fourth chapter in the book we are currently reading, Chabani Manganyi's Being Black in the World, published in 1973. The name of the chapter is also Being Black in the World. The general idea that is discussed in this chapter is how an understanding of African personality will determine the mode of being in the world for black people. That is, the ways in which black people relate to objects, to time, to space, to each other, and to the world. Manganyi starts off the chapter by criticizing popular studies of the time that sought psychological properties to determine the uniformity of cultural patterns and practices among African people, thereby defining what African personality was from that perspective. Here is Manganyi explaining further. Since there has been and is an African ontology which has created cultural variations, there appears to be no sound basis for skepticism with regard to the respectability and the status of the concepts of negritude or African personality as defined by us. Manganyi says it is not up to the white psychologist and anthropologist to define what African personality is for black people, and turns to the work of Leopold Senghor, who was a member of the negritude movement and the first president of Senegal from 1980, who then defines African personality as the sum of cultural values of the black world. This definition echoes what has already been said in previous episodes about black consciousness as mutual knowledge regarding the suffering of black people and the persistent cultural values and practices over time towards solidarity and a change in the sociological schema that structures the black body as inferior and bad. Manganyi combines the political and the clinical to produce an existential output. If you are interested in this, you can search for the work of Louis Gordon, who has been at the forefront of what is called Black existential philosophy or Afrikaner philosophy. I've been struggling with connectivity, hence the delay in uploading the episodes, but I will hopefully upload the next episode tomorrow in the morning. Thank you. Hi everyone, I am the Spiritual Seeker. I am an independent researcher, numerologist, and member of Black Space Azania. Black Space is a black consciousness formation. You can follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page for more information and updates. In this episode, we look into the 5th chapter in the book we are currently reading, Chabani Manganyi's Being Black in the World, published in 1973. The name of the chapter is Nausea. In this chapter, Manganyi is seemingly inspired by the existentialist writings of Jean-Paul Sartre, who also has a book called Nausea. This chapter might be a bit confusing to someone who does not have the foundational knowledge of certain concepts and themes that Manganyi draws from. At the beginning of the chapter, he discusses the legitimacy of taking one's life, then goes on to discuss how illness affects how we relate to time, space, and to other people. Then goes on to discuss how the political and cultural context influence our modes of being in the world and the meanings we attach to suffering, pain, illness, and to the absurdity of life. All these brief discussions are meant to lead us to question and understand the grammars of suffering for Black people and for white people under the settler colonial system of Apartheid in South Africa, making us ask the question, what does it mean to suffer? Here is Manganyi in his own words. Having been a colonized people over several centuries and still being in important aspects a colonized people, the question arises as to whether suffering and the general absurdity of life can have the same meaning for us as it may for white people. Close quote. In a sense, white workers might ask themselves why they have to wake up every day and go to a job where they are exploited and not paid enough. But for Black people, it is more than just exploitation, but how the suffering and death of Black people gives white people the psychic security of knowing that, in the end, they are at least not Black. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you in the next episode. Hi everyone, I am the Spiritual Seeker. I am an independent researcher, numerologist, and member of Black Space Azania. Black Space is a Black consciousness formation. You can follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page for more information and updates. In this episode, we look into the 6th chapter in the book we are currently reading, Chabani Manganyi's Being Black in the World, published in 1973. The name of the chapter is Reflections of a Black Clinician. This chapter has 3 sections. The first section is a revised version of a paper he published in 1972. In this section, Manganyi discusses disorders related to body image and body boundary experiences, comparing Black patients who suffer from paraplegia to normal people. Paraplegia is a condition caused by injury or disease on the spinal cord, resulting in immobility of the lower body. It was initially thought that the patients who suffered from paraplegia were going to exhibit symptoms of discomfort resulting from low self-confidence in the image of their bodies. But to the surprise of the observer, both groups relatively showed symptoms of low self-confidence. Manganyi concluded that body image as an internalized conception, experience, and image of the physical self might be influenced by earlier socialization, thereby making our conceptions of our physical selves culturally determined. Here is Manganyi expanding on that point. The physical body constitutes an individual's anchor in the world. It is the physical body which makes it possible for an individual to be given a name, to tell all and sundry who he is, to constitute lived space. The body is the nexus of all the fundamental relations which an individual person develops with others, with objects, with time and space. If the integrity of the body is violated, as it has been in the case of Black people, the other existential relationships also become distorted. Integrity of the body is what a solid foundation means for a good house. Violate the integrity of this foundation, the body, and everything else collapses after the fact. In the second section, Manganyi discusses the difficulties or challenges that arise during psychotherapy between white clinical psychologists and psychiatrists and Black patients. As stated before in the introduction and in the biographical summary, Manganyi was the first Black South African to be registered as a clinical psychologist. That means hospitals were overwhelmingly filled with white psychiatrists and white clinical psychologists. It was then a challenge treating neurotic disorders through psychotherapy, because sessions were also structured by the racial dynamics of the time, with Black patients seeing white clinical psychologists as masters or bosses, and a sociological schema that has structured the Black body as bad and inferior, repelling the help that was needed. In the last section, Manganyi talks about the need to train more Black clinicians and develop psychotherapeutic tools to treat neurotic disorders in non-white or Black communities. Overall, I've mentioned before that if Manganyi's analysis of Blackness through the individual schema and the sociological schema in its preoccupation with the body does not consider the loss of bodily integrity, the shattering of the corporeal schema, then it would be an incomplete analysis. What Manganyi describes in the first session as the violation of the integrity of the body is something that we can work with, especially when we consider how anti-Blackness as a structure preceded the settler colonial system of apartheid, locating Black people outside of civil society and against the categories of human, citizen, men, woman, etc. Hi everyone, I am the Spiritual Seeker. I am an independent researcher, numerologist, and member of Black Space Azania. Black Space is a Black consciousness formation. You can follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page for more information and updates. In this episode, we look into the 7th chapter in the book we are currently reading, Chabani Manganyi's Being Black in the World, published in 1973. The name of the chapter is The Meaning of Change. You would remember that when we were reading Steve Biko's essays in the book I Write What I Like, we saw how the South African Students' Organization, SASO, was formed towards the end of the 1960s and was active throughout the 1970s, 1980s, and into the 1990s. In this chapter, Manganyi acknowledges that the philosophy of Black consciousness may have been instrumental in raising the awareness of the non-white or Black populations about the structural violence of the settler colonial system of apartheid. Manganyi makes a reading of some of Prof. Moolman's observations, who was at the time director of the African Institute in Pretoria. Prof. Moolman observed that the settler colonial system of apartheid became a spatial system through the policy of separate development and created subsystems in the form of Bantustan homelands. Manganyi acknowledges that it has largely been through the effort of the rising, articulate Black population that the existence of the Bantustan homelands was seen as a sham that created leaders who had no interest in fighting against the system that made them instruments in the ongoing dispossession of land, resources, and labor of the African people. You will also remember how Buthelezi was thrown with stones at the funeral of Robert Sobukwe by the members of the Black consciousness movement. Additionally, Manganyi does also discuss the illegal worker strikes and the growing tensions between South Africa and other Western countries over South Africa's racial and economic policies. There have been recently debates about the applicability of Marxism in South Africa. In a country where labor is Black and wealth is white, surely there should not be any difficulty in adding one and one together. I think the only problem arises when the Black exceeds and stands in contradistinction to the category of worker, making us see the underlying anti-Blackness and racial slavery that has structured the economy of South Africa, leading to the formation of the institution and system of apartheid. Hi everyone, I am the Spiritual Seeker. I am an independent researcher, numerologist, and member of Black Space Azania. Black Space is a Black consciousness formation. You can follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page for more information and updates. In this episode, we look into the last chapter in the book we are currently reading, Chabani Manganyi's Being Black in the World, published in 1973. The name of the chapter is Postscriptum, African Time. We have so far read the analysis that Manganyi made regarding the settler colonial system of apartheid and how it configures the reality of black people differently, producing a sociological schema that structures the black body as bad and inferior. That there is also a need for us to then question, understand, and make contributions towards a general understanding of the black mode of being in the world. Manganyi calls this last chapter an afterthought. In this chapter, Manganyi makes a critical reading of Prof. Engelbert's paper, published originally in Afrikaans in 1972 as Die Tyd en Neurosie by die Bantu. Basically, time and neurosis among the Bantu. The argument that Engelbert makes is how the tempo, the time, of the Bantu, the black or the African, is much slower than the tempo or the time of the white person. That it is only when the two worlds collide that there is distortion or dislocation in the general human experience of time. Manganyi concluded that this paper was merely an apology for the apartheid policy of separate development and had no scientific basis. This is very telling of how white racists have always been, that an academic journal can publish a paper that has no scientific evidence, reaching the wildest of conclusions only because it was an opinion of a white Afrikaner man. I honestly don't think Manganyi should have responded to the paper or even included it in his book. White racists have no sense of irony and have never been creative enough with excuses for their anti-black sentiments. That is why a white racist can say things like, I am not racist, I have black friends. I am not racist, I was brought up by a black servant. I am not racist, the school I attended had black learners. So there is honestly no need to argue with such people. A recent example would be Helen Zille. Why do we always platform anti-black and arrogant white people and get upset when they act out who they truly are in public? Helen Zille knows who she is. She does everything with focused intention, like a witch doing alchemy. She alchemizes black people's anger and hate with careful intention into anything that will be beneficial to her. In the next episodes, I will do a reflective summary and conclude the series. Thank you. Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. I am the spiritual seeker. I'm an independent researcher, numerologist, and member of Black Space Azania. Black Space is a black consciousness formation. You can follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page for more information and updates. I started off the series by introducing Chabani Manganyi's Being Black in the World, published in 1973, linking it to Steve Biko's I Write What I Like. Throughout the series, my aim was to reflect on black existence under the settler colonial system of apartheid, using Manganyi's philosophical, psychological, and political insights. I then explained the method, reading the book chapter by chapter, providing summaries, reflections, and links to related thinkers. I've come across a lot of videos on Biko and Manganyi. I mean, those people could have been more creative to not use the exact wording that I used in the summaries. But what can you say? In episodes 3 and 4, I introduced Chabani Manganyi's biography as South Africa's first black clinical psychologist, academic, and author. And we then read the book's introduction, where Manganyi asks whether there is a black mode of being in the world and how it differs from the white mode of being in the world. In episodes 5, 6, and 11, I explored urbanization, detribalization, and cultural shifts between rural life and urban life, examining black consciousness and the formation of the South African Students' Organization, SASO, and its definition of black as a political identity. And we also reflected on the black consciousness movement's challenge of Bantustan politics, exposing also apartheid exploitation of labor, black labor. In episodes 7, 8, and 12, I examined how apartheid created two distinctive existential realities for black people and white people. And we also considered the negritude's understanding of African personality, rejecting white definitions of African personality. And we also looked into Manganyi's critique of racist pseudoscience that claimed that Africans had a slower tempo or time as compared to white people. In episodes 9 and 10, I engaged with Manganyi's reflection on suffering and on the absurdity of life, and on illness, inspired by the work of Jean-Paul Sartre, questioning whether black and white people experience suffering in the same way. And we also explored his discussions on body image, paraplegia, psychotherapy, and the violation of the integrity of the body, linking this to Fanon's work on the shattering of the corporal schema. Paraplegia is a condition caused by injury or a disease on the spinal cord, resulting into immobility of the lower body. From episodes 1 to 12, I followed Manganyi's analysis on black existence, the mode of being, through the lens of blackness and whiteness, the anti-black sociological schema that structured the black body as inferior, and Manganyi's critique of the policy of separate development. We also saw how apartheid produced destructive schemas of black identity, and how the integrity of the body was violated under racial oppression, and how the black consciousness movement and philosophy affirmed solidarity and the liberation of black people. If there's a book that you would like us to read together, please comment with the title and link. Thank you. Hi everyone, I am the Spiritual Seeker. I am an independent researcher, numerologist, and member of Black Space Azania. Black Space is a black consciousness formation. You can follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page for more information and updates. In the previous series, we read Steve Biko's I Write What I Like, a collection of writings on the philosophy and movement of black consciousness in the belly of apartheid South Africa. We saw the importance that he gave to the psychological liberation of black people as a collective, emphasizing that the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. In this series, we read Chabani Manganyi's Being Black in the World, published in 1973. Manganyi was an academic writer and the first black person to be registered as a clinical psychologist in South Africa. There are several questions that Steve Biko raised in the previous video series, centered on the use of fear as a political weapon by the apartheid regime to suppress liberatory efforts in the country. Biko asked, what makes the black man fail to tick? We followed Manganyi's thinking regarding the settler colonial system of apartheid and how it configured the reality of black people differently, producing a sociological schema that structured the black body as bad and inferior. We've also seen that there is need for us to question, understand, and make contributions towards a general understanding of the black mode of being in the world. When I started reading the book, Manganyi's preoccupation with the body in his analysis of blackness and black existential reality through the individual and sociological schemas nearly convinced me that he was far from considering the loss of bodily integrity, the shattering of the corporal schema in Frantz Fanon's work, or the ungendering nature of anti-black violence in Hortense Spiller's work. But his discussion of the violation of the integrity of the body came so close that I felt great relief. Thanks to everyone who's been watching, reposting, and sharing the videos.